if you have not joined us for the watch party before, it's sort of like a book club. We, you guys vote on a show, and we all watch it 2 episodes at a time and discuss it in depth. And it's a really great way to watch some complicated shows. That's the way I watched Steins Gate for the first time, and it really helped my understanding. So we're currently watching Psycho-Pass. Again, we talked about this a little bit the last watch party, but please keep in mind, if you are just joining and you want to catch up, we're not that far into Psycho-Pass yet. It is very violent. There's sexual assault going on in it. It's very, very heavy. So please exercise caution. But we are on episodes 5, 6, 7, and 8. We're doing 2 to catch up, 2 watch parties. So if you want to catch up, stop now and go watch Psycho-Pass.
Yeah. Then come back.
And then come back and talk about it with us. So you can send us your comments on the Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/IGN Anime Club, the official group. And you can also tweet at us using the hashtag IGNanime, IGNIME. So just to start us up, episode 5. So going back a little bit, I'm already sort of forgetting what happens in each episode. They kind of blur together for me. Like, I know what's happening overall, but to break down what happens in episode 5, I feel like, here we go. Let's just, Neto del Toro, one of the real MVPs, kind of breaks down. So Neto del Toro on the Facebook group says, on the surface, this episode seems quite straightforward about episode 5. They identified the culprit through his pattern. So the culprit being the person stealing the avatars. Now I remember. So it's the person who killed the talisman and stole that avatar, Spooky Boogie, and then a third avatar that we were being introduced to. So they identified the culprit through his patterns, went after him, and made him pop. Simple enough, right? Well, not so much. What was at first glance the reveal and subsequent elimination of one of Makishima's, who is the white-haired main bad guy. Makishima's subordinates was also a glance into his methodology and psyche. The dude is a straight-up sociopath. Couldn't have put it better myself. He doesn't recognize this world's authority, nor does he see anyone that does as a fellow human being, as shown by how nonchalantly he disposed of Mito. He wasn't even condescending. He wasn't let down by his failure. He actually just sounded bored. So in that scene where they shot Mito in the arm, and he's like missing an arm, and he goes home and he's like, my avatars. And I'm like, oh, dude, I'm so sorry you're that upset. Makishima kind of like warps them and is like, you could have done a better job. Bye.
Yeah, pretty much.
So yeah, it was like it was almost unceremonious the way he killed him. And then continue with Neto. He sounded like a researcher whose experiment didn't turn out quite like he intended to, and immediately moved on to the next iteration. The episode also showed what kinds of subjects, remember, he doesn't see them as equals, Makishima surrounds himself with. Like he himself put it when talking to Mito, since you lacked a face, you were simply able to wear any kind of mask. I think that's a really... I just want to stop there for a second, because that's a really... it's sort of like that chameleon thing that some people do, where like if they don't have an identity, they can kind of adopt what they want to and put on a... Like I used to feel like this in high school, where I was like, I don't really know who I am still, because I was in high school. And so I'd just be like, today I'll be one of the nerds, and then I'll be a band geek, and then I'll try to talk to the cheerleaders, and never mind, I don't want to do that. And then so I really liked that line. Since you lacked a face, you were simply able to wear any kind of mask.
That's profound.
And with that kind of canvas to work with, Makishima is able to shape them, his subordinates, in a way that better suits his intentions for a particular goal. This world is his laboratory, and he's eager for knowledge. Thank you, Neto del Toro. That was a wonderful summation. I mean, Psycho-Pass just keeps making me think about... Like, obviously, it's a futuristic, dystopian sort of society, but it like any dystopian story, it makes you think about current society, and it also makes me think about myself. So like I said, it made me think of like in high school, where you feel kind of like a social chameleon, because if you lack a face, you can wear any mask.
I wasn't a social chameleon. Everyone knew who I was, and they left me alone, and that was fine.
Oh, that sounds nice.
It sure wasn't, but that's a different story. But
there's two sides to every coin. Basically, being 16 sucks. But
that's a good summation.
But it gets better.
One day you'll be 17, and it'll suck less. Etc. At infinitum.
It gets way better. It gets way better. But to your point, it's like there is something profound about the bath. Like you can wear any kind of mask. There's a certain fluidity to that. You can blend in anywhere. That's what allowed this person to do what they did.
Yeah, and it's very interesting seeing how crime works in this world with the civil system. Like the kinds of... So this is a cyber crime, which we have now, which is like the way it works and how they determine who it was. It's just really fascinating to me. Like, oh, we narrowed down the users who stopped visiting their
I like that there is
area.
1 foot in our reality, so there's like a basis to jump off, and it's like I can see this happening in our society. We're like 1 step away from most of these things,
Right.
So it's super amazing.
Technologically speaking. Yeah.
Yes, in fact, Carter says, so we finally learned the backstory, or at least part of it, to Kogami. He's originally an investigator. I'm sure some of our wiser group members could have figured it out, as Ko has showed off his crime-solving ability a couple times now. Most notably was in episode 5 when he was able to pinpoint out our avatar-stealing culprit. What is dark to think about, and the show hinted at it, is Akane falling down the same path. Mm-hmm. We've already learned she thinks outside the box, and if she gets too close with the enforcers, Ko specifically, things could go very poorly.
That did not occur to me so much. I mean, like, I know they're hinting at, like, investigators can get, because it's happened, like you said, Megan, like, this does have a foot in our reality, as does most dystopian fiction. Like 1984 and stuff like that, which Psychopaths has these vibes from.
Yes, definitely.
Is people who are detectives or who work with crime in any capacity in real life, it's a hard job. Like I really wanted to study criminology really badly. Like I wanted to work at the FBI real bad. I was like, I'm going to go to Quantico and I'm going to do this whole thing.
Because you love murder.
I love murder.
Bring it back around.
But I didn't end up doing that because then I was like, video games are like basically murder.
Yeah, it's.
I just
it kills time.
I didn't do that, but I'm still.
Hey.
I'm still really into that. And I was talking to somebody here who actually majored in criminology and ended up in the same place I did, which is interesting. And she was saying that she knew she couldn't do it for a job because it got so heavy because if you see a cold case or something, you see something that can't be solved, it weighs on you because it's like there's no justice for this victim and stuff like that. So then you kind of see that with Kogami, where he's so haunted, especially because his subordinate, we'll see in one of the later episodes
right.
in this group, his subordinate died, and like a grisly death where he was like made plastic with the plastic resin or whatever.
Yeah.
I forget how they phrased it in the sub. But that kind of thing weighs on you. Like if you can't solve it, or if you just see heinous crime after heinous crime and like grisly scenes, like some people, that's very hard, and it makes your figurative hue very cloudy. So we see that happening. Like that is definitely a possibility. And that didn't occur to me when this show started. Like, oh, some of the enforcers were probably former investigators. It makes perfect sense, but I like didn't think about that. And
but
so
Carter caught that.
Yeah.
Smart. Thank you, Carter.
Nicely done, Carter. And so
it kind of explains why Ganoza is so like just.
Well,
he's not.
He
like,
walls himself
oh,
off.
Yeah,
super
completely.
hardcore. Which is, so you see that danger for Akane, who is still very green and very much like
affected by things.
Yeah.
Like, will she, hardwall just like Ganoza, or will she end up like Kogami?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Oh. Stay tuned, kids.
And then finishing up episode 5, Lisa Liu says, "Goodness, what a great episode. Loved how they just explored the idea of social media communities. Are Miranda, Megan, Callie, and Mike really just avatars? Haha, JK.
You got me. You figured it out.
Just disappear.
I enjoyed the pacing of this episode because they had enough plot development for the season overall while solving the immediate crime in front of them. I like that too. I think that's a good point. Is like it was monster of the week. Like this show, that's how most mystery shows start, because they're establishing characters and like how solving crimes in this universe works. I did like that this had ramifications for much later on while also solving this immediate crime.
Right.
Side note, they even have machines to kick down the door. Isn't that supposed to be the fun part of being police?
Lisa's totally right. Like, isn't that part of the fun? Boom.
Speaking on the joke about us being avatars, there was another thing that really struck me in this episode was when the way Kogami figures out that the avatars have been stolen is he's saying the popularity of these avatars increased after they were stolen because a fan is better able to replicate the image of somebody than the person behind the avatar, because they're a person. And so I was thinking about this in terms of like my Twitter account, right? Like I feel like maybe somebody who like has followed my Twitter account for a while could probably tweet like me in the way that maybe there's an image of me like where I'm always like, yay anime and also murder. Like those are the two things I like. But in reality, like I'm not always going to tweet about that because I am am a full human who thinks about other things besides anime and murder.
Which is interesting because it ties it back around to other things. It's like you only have part of these characters, however they present themselves, and yet it's a reflection. Like last time we talked about how, all of these different characters, including Akane, is like she's this weird little mini avatar. That's how she thinks of herself.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting that people are like, I'm gonna represent you the way that I see you, but they might be missing sort of the underlining thing, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's like when you apply a trope to somebody. Like I'm sure like something I struggle with, honestly, being on an anime show is I'm like, I'm not any anime trope. Like I'm not the moe one, I'm not the tsundere one, but I don't have to be any of those because I'm a person. But I think sometimes it's really easy. Like I do this with things that I'm a fan of. Is like I'll watch something, I'll be like, oh my god, he's totally the jock one who's gonna do that, and like. It works when you don't know the full person. Like it works if you're projecting that onto a celebrity or something.
Yeah, I was just going to use celebrities as a perfect example of what we do when we have our celebrity crushes. It's because we're seeing them how they're presented in movies and interviews. We don't see the full person, so we use cognitive dissonance to fill in the blanks.
Right, and it's like forming a headcanon about something where you're like I've seen so many headcanons about Overwatch characters, and the funniest thing is it's people just building up this character that fits neatly into this character would totally be like this and do this and do this, and it's really fun, but like you don't have anything to go off of really except dialogue from the games. But it'd be like, oh yeah, and Hanzo's totally the kind of guy who would make you breakfast in the morning. And like I love that, but also like that's kind of what this episode was about, is like a fan of something is better able to present it in a way that other fans want to see, because it eliminates everything that deviates from that perfect image that fits in that box.
Exactly.
So
very profound.
Long tangent, but that was
Wow.
something that super stuck with me from this episode. And that's why I wanted to do a short topic for the episode today, because I'm like,
There's a lot to unpack.
So much. But let's move on to episode 6.
Yes. Tyler
so-
DeBoer also has a good summary. So it says, after the revelation that Kogami was an inspector before he was an enforcer, we're treated a small flashback dream showing a former friend and colleague was killed on a case. He also finds out through a talk with the Bureau's chief that the reason Ginoza seems hard on everyone is that his father was branded an innate criminal and he's looked down upon because he may be one to unconfirm genetic possibilities.
Wait, I missed that.
I-
His dad did it, was a Nate criminal. That slipped. I didn't. I have no memory of that.
So his father was branded a criminal.
Oh, what?
Yeah. Good job, Tyler.
Man.
See? Callie learned something.
I watched it. I swear.
I know. This is my second time watching. I didn't get that apart.
The show throws so much at you. So this is why these summaries are really helpful.
This is why this is a perfect watch party candidate. So
This is awesome. Okay, so we learned about the case. Kogami went downhill from Akane's prying. The specimen case involved a pretty gruesome MO where the corpse would be altered and displayed, hidden, then shown. Akane realizes the gruesomeness of the case and apologizes to Yui, who shrugs it off and keeps
Keeps eating.
Oh yeah, just keeps eating. Was funny. Okay, so I totally be like Yui in this case.
Me too. I used to eat dinner while watching The Walking Dead.
That's why I stumbled. I was like, oh, that's right. He just keeps eating. It's like,
I would have been her. I would have been like, what, gruesome murders? Let's eat ramen.
all right, the primary suspect went missing and the case went cold, leading to Kogami still trying to solve it to this day. We're whisked off to an all-girls academy, and Oreo, the art club leader, is definitely giving off some creepy vibes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that girl was like radiating, I'm a killer.
Just stamp it on your forehead
I'm
already.
like, jeez.
Kogami looks at all the cases after a little testimony from the guy in episode 3 and believes the same person is setting all of these incidents up. Could it be this Makishima fellow?
And the guy in episode 3 is the whipping boy from the factory.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is an amazing tie-in. Okay. Lastly, to start off our new arc, we see a sculpture that's being displayed in a way similar to that old cold case. Man, that's some horror movie type stuff. And finally, Oryu is shown to be collaborating with Makishima. Bad things lay ahead. Dun dun dun.
Dun, dun,
And so they do.
I loved because serial killers in real life often have like a specific way they do things. I mean, even dating back to Jack the Ripper, it was like, we know it's Jack the Ripper because this specific thing happened in every crime scene.
Right.
So I like how at first Ginoza is like, oh, we don't know. It's like, I'm taking Kogami out the case. I don't like Ginoza. So, so he's like, and that's how he sounds like in my head. And, but so he's at first like, we don't know. And I'm like, okay, there's something called imitation killings. So it could have been an imitation murder, but like more than likely it was a very similar case. So I was like,
there's a through line here.
I was like, hun, you got to be a little less sassy towards Kogami.
A little less Tim Gunn.
Tim Gunn's a perfect human.
I love Tim Gunn.
Yeah, so I don't know, because I'm fascinated by this kind of thing, by the criminal mind. That's another thing that we're experiencing in this show is like enforcers. You don't want to like get too deep into trying to analyze the criminal mind because then you could become like the criminal mind, which is something I think Ginoza says about Kogami. And I find it very, very fascinating because it's like, how do people solve these crimes? Like, how do you think like, oh yeah, and they probably like really wanted to preserve the body? I like, that's not something I would naturally
How do you get into that mindset?
Yeah, how do you get into that mindset is one of the questions, not questions, but that is something that...
Are there any criminologists out there who want to answer these questions? Like, how do you do this? How do you separate yourself from this and yet get into the mind of a killer?
My girlfriend actually majored in criminology.
Oh, really? All right, well, let's ask her because I want to know.
Yeah, I super wish I had. I love criminology. And then Lisa Liu says, the plot thickens. I'm really enjoying getting to know about Kogami's background, and I can't help but wonder if this is all foreshadowing about what Akane is going to go through next. Again, something that didn't occur to me for some reason, because I was so focused on the case. I got way too caught up in the serial killer stuff. So thank you for that. Also, genetics linked to psychopaths not confirmed yet. That's another detail from this episode is like, genetics aren't confirmed to your psychopath hue. That doesn't mean they are. Like, it was like this obscure thing talking to Kogami, like, or Ginoza. I think they look similar. I don't know. And then Lisa Liu says, I find that odd since schizophrenia and bipolar disorder pretty much have been shown to have a genetic predisposition. Yeah, that's true. Most mental disorders or illnesses have genetic, not that you'll get it, but like there is a genetic predisposition. So it's like, oh wow, like, and it's hard to tell sometimes because like in the old days
they didn't have a word for it.
They didn't have a word for it, or they were just like, she's hysteric, and it was like, no, that woman was depressed. Like, if you ever read The Yellow Wallpaper? No. That is a short story all about how a woman was depressed, so they locked her in a room by herself until she went insane. And it was like, she's crazy. And it was like, no, it's just a mental illness and you didn't know about it. But so that's the thing where like, I found out that like multiple of my like grandparents and great-grandparents had like terrible anxiety symptoms, but like nobody knew that. It was just like, wow, your great-grandma was really mean. And it was like, she had really bad anxiety and depression. No wonder I'm like this.
No, I got slammed with OCD on both sides of my family. But I swear, up until about 10, 15 years ago, people didn't really have a diagnosis or talk about it very much. It wasn't until I actually started working at IGN years ago that I met other people and I was like, oh, this is a real thing. It's not just me being weird and neurotic.
Yeah.
It's a real thing. But back in the day, it's like you don't have a word for it. You have no way to diagnose it. So
and this goes back to from the previous watch party. If you didn't catch for episodes 3 and 4, I did get a little bit into intrusive thoughts and more discussion on mental illness. I did get an email about that. Somebody was saying they really enjoyed that discussion. So if you have thoughts on that, I would love to hear them. I find it really interesting.
Yeah, please. Your feedback is wonderful. All of these are great emails that we got.
And mental illness is something that's really important to me. Like, mental health is really important to me. So I find thinking about that with relation to psychopaths really interesting.
All right, that's episode 7.
We got to move on. Yeah, we do. We're running out of time. Episode 7. Tyler DeBoer again. We got the body sculpture from being investigated by our heroes. We got the body sculpture from being what? Anyway, the body sculpture is being investigated by our heroes. Sorry, I think I just read that wrong. Due to the relation to a previous case, Kogami is pulled from the investigation. Akane goes to Kogami for a talk about the old case and his previous partner. Akane, we see you checking out Kogami's abs. I did see you, and I was also checking out Kogami's abs. And you know how I said I loved...
first time we've seen those.
I loved redheaded anime boys. I still do, but I really like Kogami a lot. You know?
I was watching this and I'm like, Callie's probably watching this right now.
I was like... Yeah. And then when she was like, you need to put a shirt on, I was like, girl, me too, but also you idiot. So Akane is like, well, what? And I was also right there with her.
I'm like, top 10 anime abs still needs to happen. You have some good candidates.
Kogami. You're in the running.
Okay.
Anyway, we hear more about Sasayama, a faulted but ultimately good-hearted man. So he was the one that's sort of like a womanizer. He would grab people's butts, which I feel like makes you not super good-hearted, but he also was really defensive of a rape victim, apparently, from what the description was. So a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. Oreo gives us some information about herself. Her father was an artist whose beliefs impacted her. She believes her art will enlighten humanity. And his art was the grotesque, I'm going to tell humanity... the justification was really convoluted to me, but it was like, I'm going to draw distorted, dismembered girls' bodies to tell you about the dangers of the world. Or so, like, it was just like this weird... To me, I feel like I need to, like, really listen to his explanation again, because to me I was like, that is some BS.
It kind of reminded me of Saw, the movies, when you finally find out like Jigsaw's motivations are like to get people to appreciate life more by trapping them in these horrible things. Live or die, make your choice. And it's like, you're a horrible human being. You are not doing God's work here. What are you doing?
It's like that Brooklyn Nine-Nine quote, like, cool motive, still murder.
I'm curious if she was like that before or after she met Makishima, because they don't really talk about that too much.
Yeah, they don't get into that.
But yeah, that whole, I mean, her childhood must have been...
So continuing with Tyler, Makishima discusses his philosophy with another associate of his. He believes the system is hurting mankind. Afterwards, we get another body where Oreo continues to plan and create more. Touching on the philosophy, basically they talk about how stress is, to a certain extent, good for your body. Quick side note, if you have too much stress, your cortisol levels go out of control and then your metabolism shuts down like mine did. So please watch out for yourself and take care of yourself, because it's very bad for your body. But to some extent, stress is good for you because it teaches you, like, it's like a adrenaline, like, fight or flight thing. They kind of talk about the philosophy of you need a little bit of stress to motivate yourself, and it helps you. And I do think that makes sense. Like, stress has motivated me to do better. And I mean, that's obviously like a totally just...
Well, it's all about checks and balances, right?
Like, everything in moderation.
You have stress, I've got so much work to do, but it gives you that drive of fight. But when it gets too high, then you go in the opposite direction and you shut down physically and mentally.
Right. And so they're talking about how the civil system has basically eliminated all stress because it just decides your whole life path for you. Which, I mean, like, the stress of, like, what am I going to do with my life really pushes some people to when you have the right amount of stress, to do something you really want to do. And I think that's great. So they're talking, and that's their philosophy, is like, with no stress, people have become catatonic vegetables, basically, because they have nothing driving them. And the civil system has eliminated everything that could be called a reason to live, is what he says. So I found that really interesting as well. And we should just keep moving on.
Yeah, the next comment is really interesting. The whole thing about the lighting in the art room. I didn't even pick that up.
Oh, yeah. Astralius says, the light in the art room, whereas the orange light from the setting sun indicated the end of the second victim's life, in the previous episode, the red light indicated that the danger or death awaited the third victim.
I love stuff like that.
I was like, mind blown.
No, that is a great, like, I mean, that's something that maybe I should pay more attention to, because obviously anime is a visual medium, and there are going to be cues like that. And there's some shows where I do notice that. I think during 5 centimeters per second, I talked about that a little bit, or we did as a group. But that I totally didn't. I mean, maybe like I noticed it passively, like, oh, it sets the mood. But I just loved getting that pointed out. So thank you.
Yeah. I should, considering this is my second watch too.
And then to conclude, because we are running out of time, episode 8, Megan Murphy has quite the comment. Go Murph. It says, the worst villains are ones that are deeper than some surface level thirst for power or justice. Makishima appears charming, handsome, and eloquent. However, he's a brilliant and clean sociopath with a knack for puppeteering impressionable proxies. He taps into any darkness or insecurity and tempts them to act upon it, providing them with endless supplies or security to do so. However, when he decides he's done with them, snip, snip, their strings are cut and the puppets fall lifeless to the ground. I just love that description so much. Arguably, the civil system created and enabled Makishima. He's abusing it and hacking it for his own murderous playground. When the world relies on technology for everything, human intuition or deductive reasoning are thrown out the window. Blind spots are created, and living, breathing evil like Makishima creep in those blind spots, wreaking havoc without ever getting caught. When the girl is crying in the rain about losing her friend, she's told to get over it or else her hue clouds up. I mean, that's another thing that happens a lot in this show is kind of like, don't think about it. And that's like something my grandparents will do. We're like, well, we'll not talk about problems because that's how they become problems. And it's like, no, they're still there.
This is a crazy world where like, if anything's on the news, the stress in the area will go up.
Yeah.
And then that just causes all.
Yeah.
It's really hard. I think just it's hard to be in a community where you want to know about these things, but then if you do, then you're susceptible to being cloudy. And just like no one knows anything.
Yeah, like they took the original specimen case off the news, I believe, because it stressed people out so much. That's like. I mean, that happens to me. You know when you watch the news and you're like, I can't do this anymore. This is so depressing.
I actually had a breakdown one day a few years ago. The news was so bad for 20 minutes straight. Like I burst into tears and I had to turn it off.
Yeah.
Because I'm a news junkie and it takes a lot to get me to do that, but it was really bad. So your stress does start, rising when that kind of thing happens.
That's why self-care, I mean, like just a quick note, because obviously in Psychopaths, the Sybil system is designed to do that for you, but like self-care is a skill and it takes a lot to recognize when you've hit your limit, and it's hard and you have to really think about it. It takes a lot of learning yourself. But that's like, you get to a point where you're like, you have to shut the news off, or like, I'm not going to go on Twitter anymore today because I just don't want to read about this anymore. Yeah. And for example, so I just find it interesting. Like the Sybil system seems to be trying to like an attempt at a solution to mental health problems in this world. Yeah. When, at least from my perspective, a good solution has just been working really hard at getting the skills to deal with it.
Sure. But it's almost like this distrust of humanity in general. Like you don't have the discipline to do anything for yourselves and you're all criminals anyway. So we're going to take all these choices because then everyone will be nice and they'll be stress free. And yet it's creating its own unique set of problems, which is what makes the show so fascinating.
So fascinating. Yeah. All right, continue with Megan Murphy. The Sybil system won't even allow humans to feel guilt or remorse or mourn those they love. Isn't grief a sign of mental release and healing for some people? If it's all bottled up, won't it turn into explosive rage and regret later on, or worsen depression? And would that not make things for their hue even worse? Yeah, that's another consideration. Is like if you don't confront your feelings, like have you ever been like really mad at like a significant other for like a series of small things, or like maybe they did something, you're like, I'll write this off, but I'm gonna remember this. And then like months later they like don't empty the dishwasher or something, and you're like, oh my god, you don't do anything, and you're like kind of blow up. That happened to me once, like in like my first relationship, where like I was not good at handling that sort of stuff and the communication wasn't that good. So I was like, I think I was like making the bed and he like wasn't helping because it was like a one-person job, but I also was like, oh my god, why don't you ever help me with anything? And it just exploded, when really I could have just been like, hey, remember that time you like didn't help with the groceries and I was sort of mad? Like you could handle it in small doses. So it sounds like when you're just like, oh, don't think about it, it'll cloud your hue, you're really just setting yourself up for a much cloudier hue later.
It's going to come out somehow. Exactly. It's going to come out well.
I mean, these are all things I think about when I watch this show, because it does, like we said earlier, it does have a place in reality, and so it makes me think about my own reality. It's really thought-provoking for me, and obviously for Megan, because she poses all these really interesting questions about what might happen. And then continuing on, when Rikako gets assassinated, the sequence brought to mind a prey attempting escape from an impending hunter. Instead of bloodhounds, this hunter had metal cyborg dogs sniffing Rikako out. Her foot was caught in a bear trap, and she was discovered, then literally killed off with the gun of the killer that Makishima has working under him. Pawns killing pawns. Rikako's last words remind this man that one day Makishima will be done with him too. Yeah, that's one of those things like no honor among thieves or whatever. Like, and then I just, because we're really low on time, skipping ahead a little bit, the humming during the hunt while Makishima recites Shakespeare, there are no words to describe how that juxtaposition was terrifying. We've left off with the cliffhanger that Kogami is now targeted as the next puppet. However, if Kogami is already suspicious of a man named Makishima, maybe there will be some double agent work at play. That is another thing that I just love. The Facebook group is full of foresight that I was just not full of when I was watching these episodes. Because I watched them at night, and frankly, during the 6th episode, it was episode 6, I was watching it, and I was like, it was like 2 a.m. or something. I was like, I gotta watch it. And then I'm like falling asleep. And then 5 minutes in the show have passed and I was like, what's going on?
But this is a great thing that goes back around to rewatching the show. You pick up on these little things. You're like, oh my God, there's so much symbolism here and foreshadowing.
Dude, that Shakespeare quote just gave me shivers as the hunt was going on. Man.
Yeah.
Let's hope for more of that.
Yeah. And then I really like Megan's last comment to wrap this up. Also, this is some more shallow analysis, but Akane cross Kogami, I ship it like UPS. That is the new thing I'm going to say because...
Ship it like UPS.
Oh, yeah. She is so into him. Have you seen her? Like, when she's, like, actually physically turning to look at his abs, I was like, dang, girl.
Yeah.
Do what you do.
Yeah, I mean, like, maybe...
And she's technically his boss.
Oh, that's really bad. Wait. My like split second initial reaction was, and then I was like, no.